Hi everybody, on some requests I'm posting up some videos about some of the DCC work I do, especially on the smaller locomotives. In this case, this is a Southern Pacific C9 consolidation, a 280. It's a brass model from Key, so it's correct for the era and specific. This is a later model Southern Pacific, so it's definitely worthwhile to DCC this, especially since it has the traction wire tires on the bottom. So it will make a huge difference as far as brass pulling power. The problem is getting DCC into this is pretty difficult because the tender is actually all soldered and brazed together, so you can't really get it apart. Unlike the larger tenders where you could take it apart from the bottom, this one you actually have to cut apart. And on this particular model, you would cut it apart from the top here and top here. It's brazed and there's solder inside. So you could take a X-Acto knife and slowly work your way in on this edge, and horizontally on that front edge to eventually work it off. It's a lot of work. Some others have been definitely ballsy and put a big Wohler solder gun and heated the heck out of it and just popped it off. After you pop it off, you don't need to solder it in. You could just use tacky glue from Microscale, and it'll just hold in, as I have. And I just repainted it with black and did a little weathering. So DCC on this is not easy because the access is just inside of this bunker hatch, and so the only decoder I use is this Locksound 5 Nano. I'll put it down here for a little reference in size. So it looks extremely small, but when you consider the diameter of the tank and the approach angle that you have to kind of fish this in and wind it through, that's about as big as you have. Below it, I also hardwire a TCS KA1 Keep Alive, especially since this is such a small and light locomotive. Keeping contact and power to everything is important. This is one of the few decoders that actually has a solder provision, I think on pad 6. Don't quote me on that. On the back here, you have to cut off some of the heat shrink, and then there's an open pad that you can solder the negative pole of the Keep Alive onto. The speaker you would actually glue to the top of the bunker in here, or to the front wall of the bunker, and you can make something out of parts that you could get from any electronic stores. Just cheap Chinese electronic speakers like this. You buy them in the big packs and you build your styrene enclosures to your needs, or you could fit in a Soundtrax device. The Soundtrax devices have thicker plastic walls. They do sound pretty good, but once they're basically super glued onto one of the structure elements of the tender, the entire tender becomes a speaker. So the thickness of the enclosure isn't that critical of a deal. So that's roughly getting a DCC into this, but not everybody can afford one of these units. So I actually recommend looking at one of these. Now this is the Bachmann Spectrum consolidation. This one has minimal work, just a couple of minor details. The number boards were updated. The sand domes and all that are still not exactly in the correct position, but you can see that I actually adjusted all these walkways and moved the air pumps around and moved some of these blowdowns out of the way, along with fabricating some of, this one doesn't have it, along with fabricating some of the walkways and all that, sunshades. The big deal to make this a Southern Pacific, late era Southern Pacific, is to put an oil bunker on top. And you can either construct this out of plastic, or there's some resin kits for ATSF consolidations or Mikados to put a oil bunker that you put on there. This one is just a resin cast, so it's not that big of a deal. But this, the consolidations from Bachmann are great haulers. That they got traction tires, they pull very strong. They just typically have the wrong tender for Southern Pacific operations. You could put different types of headlights. So you'll have to do your research. I did it. 2868 was a C11 or something, one of the later USRA type consolidations. There weren't a lot of these, but this is actually reasonably accurate for this cab number. And it's a good puller, so it's definitely a good workhorse. Now, if you wanted to go a little bit more and didn't want to go for the, if you didn't want to go into brass, but you wanted a little more SP, You could do a model power swap, and this is a model power tender, DCC in it, the same consolidation, but you see here I've actually moved some of the sand domes around for this particular one, and kind of bent some of the hoses and wires and injectors to reflect what's accurate. I redid a lot of these walkways. Sorry, I can't see with this lighting here. A lot of the walkways are a little more accurate, and you'll even see these SP style front steps that were done out of styrene. So there's a lot of detail that's on these things that you could do to try to model a good consolidation. The tenders are harder and harder to come by. Those who do have them, stash them. You can even cut this down into a short, narrow ADC type switcher tender that I have on a different project. But that's basically the short of consolidations, and I'll let you just kind of line them up without dropping anything, hopefully. And you can see the difference. I'll just try to hold that there as long as I can. And yeah, the Bachmann consolidations will get you pretty close. The brass, the Southern Pacifics, even with the Mikados, typically have smaller boiler diameters and all that. So yeah, if you have the opportunity to get one of the later model C9, C10 consolidations, get one of those. If not, the Bachmanns are definitely the true hard runners of your small switching layout.